Hey people, another edition of Off the Shelf, and today's book is Satori in Paris by Jack Kerouac. What is a satori? A satori is a Japanese word for a sudden illumination or a sudden awakening. And this novel, Satori in Paris, was one of Kerouac's last novels. He wrote it when he was about 43 years of age, which would have been just shortly prior to his death. And what makes this novel a little different to the landscape of other Kerouac novels is it's set in Paris when Kerouac went back to Paris to research his family genealogy. Okay, now this book is classic Kerouac prose. If you're familiar with Kerouac's novels, you know Kerouac didn't give a shit about punctuation, which is cool with me. He made up for that in imagination. Alright, and I'll just give you a brief account of Jack Kerouac. He was known as the father of the Beat Generation, the main man, the Mac Daddy, who was propelled into almost an overnight fame and stardom with the publication of his novel On the Road, which was 1957. He was part of the Beat Generation along with Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs, Neil Cassidy, Gregory Corso, and and the rest of those guys. So Satori in Paris, if you're a fan of Kerouac, you will enjoy. Okay, at times it just seems like it's a story written by a guy who's a washed up drunk in his 40s, staggering around Paris and getting on people's nerves. But there are moments of brilliance in the novel, typical Kerouac scenarios. He spends his time in Paris hitting up the libraries, doing research on his family heritage, and then he goes to Brittany, where he wanders the streets of Brittany without a place to stay, researching his family name and his family roots. Okay, it is not, I wouldn't put it up there with the likes of On the Road, Big Sur, or Dharma Bums, but it is a good Kerouac novel. Okay, the only problem I would have with this novel is, as you can see, it's a small book. Okay, just over 100 pages, and the book was expensive. It was expensive enough, and the thing about the book is that it could even have been a lot thinner, like a chapbook, a small chapbook of poetry. But what the publisher's done with this one was they printed quarter pages, if you can see here. So every chapter or so, like that's a chapter there, 37, and it's basically a verse, with a blank page to the left of it. And that's what the book is basically made up of, is blank pages and half pages, just to make it look like it was a bit bigger of a publication. Which I read this book in a couple of hours, and I'm a huge fan of Kerouac. I got into Kerouac quite a few years back, of course through On the Road was my first introduction to Kerouac, and I would recommend this to somebody who's familiar with Kerouac, who's read On the Road, Lonesome Traveller, The Town and the City. It's a decent book. It's one of his last books, which I would recommend, if you wanted to get a look at how he was at the twilight of his life, you might say. He was well into the process of drinking himself into an early grave at this stage, but he still had his talents as a writer. The prose is still spontaneous. He was a bit lonelier. He showed his loneliness and his vulnerability in this novel. But I'd say all in all, if you're a Kerouac fan, give Satori in Paris a try. It won't take you long to read. A couple of hours, maybe an afternoon. And it's a good one to have in the collection. Another one to go into the Kerouac collection. And I did enjoy it. It's not the best Kerouac novel out there, but it certainly is a good insight into Kerouac in his later years. He was always a family guy when it came to his parents. When he wrote about his parents and his family, he always wrote of them with love, and it's basically him chasing up his family heritage. Okay, so that's the book, Satori in Paris. If you get a chance, give it a read. If you're a Kerouac fan, you probably won't be let down. And that's this issue of Off the Shelf. Cheers.